And I think I stayed around at the Brighton Town Hall until 8:15, waiting for the second person to show up. But anyway, that didn't make much difference. That was a bad night, too. That was cold. Well, we can keep it a little bit informal here, and if anything comes up along the way that you'd like to ask me about, just raise your hand. Now, in order to determine how the town of Irondequoit grew to become what it now is, we must make certain corrections to the data which are available in the records and to make use of what other data we can extract or deduce. First of all, the town as we now know it was only a part of the town, was only a town after it was separated from Brighton in 1839. But since that time, through the loss of lands to the city of Rochester, the population fluctuated considerably. The largest loss was in 1874 when the portion between Clifford Avenue and Norton Street was taken. Thus, we can see from the Irondequoit story that the population dropped from 3,990 in 1870 to 1,872 in the year 1875. Again, in 1891, a strip along the Genesee River was taken where the Seneca Park Zoo is now located. In 1906, the remainder of the east side of the riverbank was taken all the way down to Somerville. 1907, Rand Eastman Park with its right-of-way down Culver Road was carved from the town. In addition, a narrow strip along the east end of Norton Street and what is now the Densmore Creek sewer line between Culver Road and the bay was taken. In 1914, another big bite was taken, extending from Norton Street to Long Acre Road and along Norton Street for much of its length and the area bounded by Waring and Culver Roads and Clifford Avenue. In 1923, once more, big portions were taken between Norton and Ridge Road, west of Portland Avenue, another piece on the western edge of Rand Eastman Park. After 1925, the consent of 51% of the property owners was required, and the annexation ceased. Thus, any comparison between the present population and that in 1840, the first full year as an independent town, must take into account these various annexations and the rates of growth between census counts. In some cases, actual house counts could be made from the old plat books. At any rate, I've been able to come up with the estimate that the population in Irondequoit in 1840 was 408. Only a statistician would be certain enough to say 408. Any reasonable person would say 400, give or take 50. Using the figure of 400 as a handy number, then we can see that the town is now 150 times as large now as it was in 1840. The growth has been anything but steady. The chart will show you how little growth there was for many years. Growth varied from less than 100 per 5-year period to several hundred up until the turn of the century. I can show that over here on this chart. And you can see that starting in the year 1840, right up until 1920, the population grew very slowly. And it took 80 years for it to rise from about 400 to a little under 5,000. Now, getting into some of the auxiliary information which we can bring to bear on the subject, we study the installation of improvements in gas facilities in particular. Actually, I come here wearing 3 hats, not only as the treasurer of the organization and chairman of the Planning and Zoning Board of Appeals, but also as assistant superintendent of gas distribution of the gas and electric. So we'll work them all in. In general, without intending to make this a commercial, the real intensive development of real estate is accompanied by the amenities such as water, electric service, gas service, and sewers. Under the terms of the Public Service Commission rules, gas service can only be extended when there is economic justification. That is, a sufficiently high population density to bring a fair rate of return. Thus, since the year 1911, when the first gas mains were installed in the town, until the present, we can determine just how the town grew through the dates of main installations in the streets. And we can fill in the years between censuses and our population studies by using the number of gas customers year by year. The ratio of gas customers to the total population is a rather constant ratio. At least it varies only slowly with time. Thus, we're in a position to study the town year by year, area by area. The population in the year 1911 was 3,350. Have been growing at the rate of 60 to 70 per year for the preceding 2 decades. The largest concentration of residences was St. Paul Boulevard. And the homeowners or builders at the beginning of the 1911-1920 decade were about 120 in number. If we look at this map here, we can see in yellow where the gas mains were installed prior to 1920. And this is generally coincident with those areas that had a high enough population concentration to warrant spending money on improvements. So we find area down here on the lake, all of White City here. We find these little spots here, but the one thing that we find in common, that all of these were areas that were easily reached from the city. They had to be on a trolley line. They had to have public transportation. Now, if we look at the old records, we can find, if we were to take St. Paul Boulevard, which had the largest concentration of residents at that time, we find names there that you don't see in the town very much anymore, like McBurney, Warner, Rayner, Redfield. We found a Grant, but we still have Grants around here. Straley, Pengelly, Waterstrut, Rocco, Armbruster, Leary, Luth, Musselman, Hempel, Munger, Jacqueline, George, Houck, Williamson, Pringle, Merritt, Wetter, McKibben, Riley, Messmer, and we also had the Irondequoit, or the Iroquois Club, and the Amity Club down here, and we had a Nicholas Izzo who had a little candy stand down here. We found this on the gas record. Charles Salmon, north of Lakeshore Boulevard, was prominent in that area and built a number of homes between 1911 and 1915. That would be just immediately north of Lakeshore Boulevard in here. North of the bend in Somerville Boulevard, there was much commercial development, including the Iroquois Club, the Amity Club, the Heisler Hotel, and even a roundhouse. Now, I don't know what this roundhouse is for, but this, again, I found on the old gas main records, that they located their gas main from the roundhouse. And it supposedly was over here someplace by the ferry terminal. I don't know. I'm not a native. But anyway, there was a roundhouse.
Yeah, big hotel.
Mm-hmm.
The roundhouse.
We square danced there one time.
Construction difficulties included many trees and roots and cave-ins in the sandy soil. There was pavement in St. Paul Boulevard only about as far north as Berry Road. This was what our records showed. And the soil varied from clay at this end for a short distance and running into sand as we got farther down here. The actual work records of the Rochester Railway and Light Company showed that the soil down at the point where the Harbor Square apartments now stand was, quote, water, quicksand, and logs.
Where was this?
Well, right down here at the bend where the bus loop used to be. When we laid that gas main in 1911 or 12, the fill, as we would call it, was indicated as water, quicksand, and logs. The wages at the time, about 1911, ranged from 33 cents per hour for the foreman to 10 to 12 cents per hour for the very indispensable water boy, with the caulkers and laborers and the rest somewhere in between. Now, the water boy, I think that the gas mains actually preceded the water mains down there. I think that probably the water boy was more interested in carrying buckets of suds, if you want to be honest about it. I don't think there was very much water carried to those construction crews. In old photographs, and these things are really gems, they're glass plate negatives, we see what the crews looked like in those days. And there were two trademarks. One was a mustache, and the other thing was a derby. And in a sense, the derby was the hard hat of the day. And the rosters of personnel are replete with Irishmen in particular. It seemed like everybody down there, in fact, we in the Gas and Electric have been retiring these people for the last 20 years. And they're still going strong 20 years after retirement, these old couple of Irishmen. Now, significantly enough, these mains are still in use today, these cast iron mains, which are a tribute to the workmanship. But when you lay cast iron mains in a mixture of water, quicksand, and logs, eventually something has to give. So we've had to replace a few of them down there with welded steel, wrapped, cathodically protected, and so forth. But generally, the workmanship has stood up. And this is true not only in Irondequoit, but in the city, in the Greece, and all over. All these gas mains, not that it's germane to the issue, but we have gas mains in Rochester that are 118 years old, still going strong. So the workmanship was excellent. We have one problem that now as we go to the use of computers for bringing our records up to date and making maintenance procedures better, we find out that some of these things were estimated from the corner saloon. In other words, they say, well, it looked like about 530 feet down there, and that was the measurement they put down there. And you can't make a computer and an Irishman agree, especially when he hasn't been dead for about 60 years. Or made it out about 60 years ago. White City was filled with permanent buildings and tents, but there was no pavement on top of the sandy soil. The largest tracts north of the railroad were the White City, Somerville Terraces, and Beatry Beach. Lakeshore Boulevard west was then Highland Avenue, and in the Somerville Heights tract, Ontario View Street, or in the Somerville Heights tract, Ontario View Street was also in existence then, and this was in the Beatry tract, the southern part of the Beatry tract. Colebrook Road was then Cole Road, and it opened as far east as Crestfield Drive and passed between the Charles Cole and Louisa Schwab farms. Pine Grove Avenue ran past the lands of Hafner, Marks, Martins, and Coy. When I wrote this, the Martins and Coy didn't strike me, but it strikes me now. Martins and Coy. From Dake's Corners, homes were built in Hudson Avenue, which is now Cooper Road, southward past Dake Avenue. In other words, down about this far in here. Titus Avenue, eastward from St. Paul, the Rogers Fruit Farm subdivision, and Charlton Estates began. And as far east as Cooper Road, nearly every farm had large glass installations. And among those were those of Adelbert Titus, John Anderson, Bart Howard, and Charles Howard. Hudson Avenue had a high concentration of greenhouses, the largest ones being those of James Howard, Abram J. Hess, Robert Smallridge, George Hallauer, and Charles Marsh. Portland Avenue, which was then Garden Street, had a number of large farms, among these being those of George Rudman, Hattie Rudman, James West and Sons, and Letty Lemming. Lamming. Culver Road, which was then Woodman Road, among other things, north of Ridge Road, had already been subdivided, and Walsford Road was one of the first subdivisions on the east side of town. Culver Road was paved with asphalt as far north as near Titus Avenue, but generally there was no pavement on the clay soil. The Wakefield subdivision and the Ridgewood areas were among the first ones. These were all Walsford and the strip along Culver Road here. The second highest concentration of homes in the 1911-1920 decade was in Ridge Road East. There was no pavement, but there were 50 to 75 homes between St. Paul Boulevard and Culver Road. Down here, the Clark, Knapp, Taft Avenue section of the North Goodman Park subdivision began to get a number of Italian-American families. Seymour and Deerfield Drive, the beginning of the Fairview Heights subdivision, showed up, and this Fairview Heights eventually extended as far east as Pardee Road and down to Empire Boulevard. It's quite a large area, laid out as early as 1918 or before. At the end of this decade, the population stood at about 5,000. Now, in the decade 1921 to 1930, which we've shown here in red, three widely...
5,000 in 1920.
About 5,000. Mm-hmm. I have the exact figures are over here, 4960 actually. By my way of reckoning, I wouldn't say these are official, but about that. In the 1921-30 decade, three widely separated areas received a major portion of the growth. They had several things in common, not the least of which was the fact that they were served by good transportation. The Seabreeze area, extending north from Titus Avenue, and only a block or two removed from the trolley lines, grew rapidly. What with the one line going down where the Seabreeze Expressway is now, and then the Culver Road line here, these could grow up with only a block or two walk to good transportation. And among these were the Arlington Tract, Lake Breeze Tract, Filan Heights, which was on the farm of Michael Filan, the Point Pleasant Tract, Bucher Subdivision, and the Crouch Farm. The Crouch Farm isn't even all built up yet. It's down here with these great big gullies. The zoning board of appeals is still contending with parts of the Crouch Farm. The Laurelton area, again, well supplied with transit facilities grew. Here we had the one line going here through this right away here, and of course Culver Road, Whitten Road, and Empire Boulevard. It wasn't very far to get a streetcar or trolley of some kind. And Orchard Park Heights was developed on what was then, or what had been up to that time, the Charles J. Brown Dairy Farm. And we began in here the first streets north of Empire Boulevard. The Fairview subdivision, which I mentioned before, over here on Pardee Road and Empire Boulevard, was pretty much all filled in. Culver Parkway subdivision on the Hastings and McFarland lands, and the Laurelton subdivision itself on the Alice Buell, Elizabeth Heberly, Ken Line, Ubiloc, and John Friend's land. All these were in here. These were all separate farms before that time. Then the southwest area was centered on St. Paul Boulevard, and these subdivisions were formed. The Seneca side on the Rogers lands, and the Rogers Estates, which was another separate subdivision, and the Somerville Boulevard tract, which is up in here. In this decade, 1921-1930, the thousands of lots were laid out, especially in the four remote corners of the town. In other words, here, 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 and here. The center remained essentially for truck gardening. Some of the larger parcels started to fall into the hands of developers, and among these were the Louisa Schwab farm on Colebrook, L.P. Gunson on St. Paul near Thomas, the David W. Thomas farm on Thomas Avenue, which was then Smuggler's Road, the Edward W. Colt property on St. Paul Boulevard, the Frederick Rocco property on St. Paul, Ezra Rogers, Asnath Rogers, Henry Clem, all on St. Paul Boulevard, William Rudman on Cooper Road, Hattie Rudman on Titus, Cheeseboro property on Culver Road, William Rice on Culver Road, Andrew Kostic, Culver and Norton, Thomas Heberly at Culver and Norton, Grace Grover on Empire Boulevard, and G.H. Pardee on Helendale Road. At the end of the decade, the town's population stood at 17,935, with the latter 5 years the more rapidly growing period. Now, if we look at the number of people added to the population by 5-year increments here, we can see when all this happened. Now, each one of these represents 1,000 people added to the population. So we see that, as you might deduce from the first graph, that nothing happened here until about the decade ending 1925. In other words, between 1920 and 25, then things really broke loose. And whereas we had that much growth in the preceding years, we jumped up here in about 8,000. Next, we consider a 15-year period from 1930 through 1945. This was a very slow period for several reasons, the Depression among others. And many of the previously subdivided lots were built upon. The average growth was 680 per year in 1930 through 35, 400 per year in the next 5 years, and 1,000 per year between 1940 and 45. And this compared with about 1,500 in the 1925-1930 period. The only major additions were on the lands of Henry Hammond on St. Paul Boulevard, Thomas Pengelly on St. Paul Boulevard, Orlo Benedict, Hiram Wilson, and Charles Howard on Cooper Road. These were the only major areas that were developed at that time. As of 1945, the population stood at 28,350. In the decade 1946-1955, many of the scenic subdivisions were developed along the fingers of land extending into the valleys of Irondequoit. People were no longer concerned about public transportation because the streetcars had died in the 1930s. The buses were still around, but they were depending upon their cars. So we started getting a little bit more adventurous. We got off on some of these little fingers of land out here, such as Mount Airy, and this one in here that goes back, let's see, Oakview Drive, I believe it is. Oak Ridge Drive, rather, and some of the other ones. In the northwest, from Pine Grove Avenue to Lakeshore Boulevard, along the west edge of the Grand Eastman Park, Oak Ridge Drive, Edgewater Lane, Scotch Lane, Cheering Road, Hastings Lane, Kenmore Lane. Mount Airy Drive was extended north from Thatcher Road on the lands of Isabella Chase and Julius Gores. Van Voorhis Avenue led down northward from Thomas Avenue on the lands of Lusink and Van Voorhis, and southward on lands of Otto Harries and Michael Megan. The greenhouses on the John Anderson and Bert Howard lands on Titus Avenue were suddenly surrounded by new homes on Mayville, Mayfair, and Briarwood. The Hallower farms on Hudson Avenue became Carroll, Redwood, and Rosemont Drives. The largest contiguous group in central Irondequoit came on the farms south of Titus Avenue, west of Portland, on the George Rudman and adjacent farms. From this came Cedar Grove, Boxwood, Allwood, Coronado, and many of those other streets. South of Titus Avenue, between Balkhart Avenue and Kings Highway, farms were turned into Spruce, Birch, Cedar Lanes, and Norlane Drive. The Pardee farm between Hellendale and Pardee Roads turned into Meadowcroft, Longcroft, Grantham, and Druid Hill Park. The former George Schneeberger and Henry Bonke farms grew into Silverdale, Lucrest, Dorrington, and Lafayette. Orchard Park was extended onto the Edward Bowman property up here, with Willowen and Swellen Drives, as well as an extension of Orchard Park Boulevard up this way. What had been the Charles Brown property off Winton Road completed the development of Irondequoit's southern boundary. A little piece down in here was filled in during that period. Other Bowman lands off Bayview Road turned into Bellevue Drive and Glenview Lane. This was up in here. After all this development, the population stood at 44,400. The most recent decade saw the remainder of the major parcels fall to subdividers. Schools, highways, or proposed parks. We were rather undecided between 1956 and 65. What the state didn't get and the schools didn't want and the county didn't want for parks went for homes, and it is still going on. Building became more of a challenge. Areas with poor water conditions, shallow lots, steep slopes, and those which had been most useful as truck gardens went on the market. Eaton Road and Thomas Avenue. The promontories off Liss Avenue, such as Old North Hill, Imperial Circle, and Knob Hill. The many 5 to 15 acre parcels north of Ridge Road between Hudson and Portland were secured, and such roads as Villanova Drive, Driftwood Drive, Plaza Drive, Sandridge Court, and Setland Drive resulted. North of Titus, off Kings Highway, the Buick and Newberry farms presented challenges to developers and scenic lots to buyers. That would be up just across Kings Highway up in here. The flat lowlands north of Ridge Road and east of Balkhart Avenue quickly built up to Fern Castle, Ellenwood, among others. Whipple Lane School was built. The old previously subdivided streets of the North Goodman Park, in other words down here, and the Heberly and DeSmith farms off Culver Road then became Brookdale, Fleetwood, Meadow Circle, and so forth, this area in here. Off Norton Street, the Heberly and Costage farms were turned into Andrea and Astronaut, and the extensions of Heberly Road, Wall Road, Whitlock Road, and eventually, most recently, that was extended to become Kennedy Circle on other properties there. The Schneeberger properties near Norton and Hellendale developed into Twin, Highview, Suncrest, now Pardee Road, High Point Trail, Viewcrest, Governor Terrace, Kenilworth, developed from the Bonke and Case farms. The Seabreeze Expressway made great changes in the town. Here we see it in purple, this stripe going through here. With few exceptions, it threaded its way from Winton Road northward across still vacant lands across Empire Boulevard, northward across the large parcels of ancient ownership until it reached the old Seabreeze line here at Seabreeze line right-of-way at Ridge Road, and it came down here with a narrowed right-of-way going down toward the lake. By 1965, the population stood at just about 60,000. New demands were being made for extensions to Durant Eastman Park. This is still going on. The county is still trying to get lands up in here, and they're still negotiating. The less said about that, the better. The Bayfront Park was and still is under consideration. We have the need for more commercial properties. Ridge Road is developing, but other areas are turning up commercial. And of course, we have more expressway. The Kilo Street Expressway is not taking too much, but it does cut the town through here again, and it does take a few houses, and it opens up some areas. Studies by the Monroe County Planning Council show that only a small amount remains, much of which is unsuitable for large-scale development. On this map here, we can see the all of that which is yellow here is essentially occupied in 1966. Now there are parts of this that are actually occupied, but this is very close to it anyway. The purple areas are those that are considered by the Monroe County Planning Council as not suitable for residential development. The blue areas are those major playground areas in the cemetery here, and the green is the park. And of course, we know that in this area where we're white, adjacent to Durant Eastman Park here, that some of this will be taken into the park. Some has been already, but the boundaries are not fixed as yet. The undeveloped areas are very small. The little red spots here, and I'm sure that these are over-exaggerated, and some of those you couldn't get to no matter how you tried. They just aren't practical to develop. So, as the way things stand right now, Irondequoit will always be basically a bedroom community. Its people want it that way, otherwise it wouldn't have grown this way. Future efforts must lie in the direction of carefully husbanding what we have with as much upgrading as possible. Now, if we look at our maps and our records, we can see that a lot of the homes in the town, a lot of the areas are getting a little old. We're going to have to be thinking about urban renewal and about replacement of some of the areas. You can pick them out. There might be some down here along the lake. There might be some down here around Seabreeze. You can pick them all almost any place in the town. But this is where we'll have to concentrate our efforts in the future. Now, based on the past growth, we could estimate what the population of the town could reach if we didn't run out of land. The trouble is we're running out of land. We know that current trends would show that we could reach about 90 million, but there just isn't that much room unless we start building a lot more apartments than are now being considered. So we would have to say that if we continue to develop the way we are, that we should level off someplace here. I would make my own guess at about 65, 66,000. That's just about all this town is going to reach. So the way we're going now, these trends are based on the way we grew in the past. But we have to recognize the fact that you get to the point here that unless we put in large numbers of apartments, we never will reach these projections. Someplace between 65 and 68,000. If there are any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Is that especially to our benefit to put in a lot of apartments? Do we want?
I don't know, that's for the people to decide, I guess.
Well, they're always fighting them.
Well, of course, the reason people fight apartments is because there are very few parcels in the town that are zoned for apartments. I mean, if the area was zoned for apartments, the people would have no chance of fight. It's the major fights come from the fact that lands that are zoned residential are sought for apartments, either on a variance basis or by rezoning from the town. And well, you could spend a whole evening talking about the two aspects of this, but as to whether apartments are in the best interest of the town, it depends on whether they're in your neighborhood or not. I think that's mostly that's the general reaction. And I think apartments are fine, but not next to me.
Right.
Mr. Gustafson,
Mhm.
have you any idea when that Garden Street became Portland Avenue?
No.
We've been trying to find out.
Well, these parts that are still white and are not good for building houses, would they try to squeeze apartments in there?
Well, I know that, for example, the Recreation Commission is looking for these parcels. And, I mean, if they're suitable for use for recreation, quite often the price is so high because people, knowing what land will go for apartments, won't sell it for recreational purposes. And that's one of the major problems for the Recreation Commission to find parcels. They're going at a fair price. They're practically non-existent. Some of these, of course, probably never will be built on. You can't even put apartments down in a big hollow. I mean, it just isn't practical.
This purple area, did you say they're trying to get this added to drainage?
Well, the purple area on that map, the Monroe County Planning Council has a very large report here called Background for Planning. And in this, they consider everything, the width of the street right-of-ways, the land which is suitable for development, the existing land use, and so forth. And in the opinions of the experts, the lands that are colored purple there are not suitable for residential development. Now, this does not mean that you couldn't build on it, because I know I've studied this throughout the county, and quite often this land that is least suitable for residential development is exactly the land that gets built on because it's the cheapest. Of course, here we're faced with steep slopes, which is a little bit different than a drainage condition. Some of the lands might be considered bad because of drainage conditions, but where you have steep slopes, you can only build very expensive houses on them, which is a different matter entirely, or apartments.
They'd be too steep to be filled in, would they?
Well,
These
it is.
gullies?
It isn't practical. No. You might better build $100,000 house on it if you're going to build anything.
You get the money.
Well, what's the basis of these maps? Does this indicate areas in which utilities were installed in these various
Well, that's right.
years that you have?
What I did was to take our records for each one of these streets. You see, because of the Public Service Commission records, it's very important how long we've had all these parcels, all these pieces of main in the ground. So by piecing together all these, you can draw contour lines. In other words, for example, if we pick the street here, we may have extended that main on 3 separate occasions. But say by 1930, we got as far as this line here. So that was cut off, and then beginning up here, that would be the next extension from that. So these are strictly based on the year that our gas mains are shown in the inventory. But we find that by checking the records, that the homes were usually built within a couple of years of the time the gas mains were installed, because as now, at that time, we didn't put money in the ground unless we saw a buck coming back. I mean, that's the way it works. The Public Service Commission demands that it be done that way, because otherwise the customers who are being supplied will be paying extra for unprofitable installation. So you can generally equate it. There are other records that would give you the same information. The building permits, if you want to go through 60,000 building permits, you come up with the same information. Or the filing of subdivision maps. It's just that this was one of the easier ways to be accurate.
But that means your first map been made prior to 1920. Only the areas might get.
The gas mains, or what did you say they were made out of?
Well, the older ones, the larger ones, are generally cast iron, and the smaller ones were steel.
Oh, but they last for a great many years, don't they?
Cast iron is almost indestructible.
Well, that makes it nice for the gas and electric. They don't have to replace them so often.
Well, of course, it's very expensive.
It is expensive to replace them.
Oh, yes.
Well, do they still use the same material?
Cast iron is,
Replacement?
cast iron is still used. No, we use wrapped steel mostly now because it's.
But what
well,
have they-
You see, if cast iron is resting on a rock and you have a fulcrum, it will crack, whereas steel will bend.
Oh.
That's about the one problem. And if you have an unstable fill, such as I mentioned, the rocks or the water, quicksand, and logs, I mean, this can settle, and if it can settle, it can break. Steel wouldn't do that. Sometimes tree wood, and of course, these are large beams. These are 8-inch
Yeah.
beams, and they're massive. They're just about indestructible.
I remember when the gas was put down on St. Paul Boulevard, I think about 1912.
1912. That's right.
And we had to buy a stove, I think at that time. You know, if in order to get the gas piped in, you had to buy a stove.
Well, before we would run a service into a house, there had to be some consumption.
Yeah.
And then if there weren't enough houses along there, then the people who wanted gas had to pay a surcharge, 12% per year of the cost, until there were enough customers on that main to warrant the investment. This again is under Public Service Commission rules.
Well, they have just put new something or others into our houses, so there's the gas company. Just what did they do?
Well, they
lined the,
They may have put a new copper lining in the service.
Yes.
You see, what we used to do. I can show you a little sketch. But we're getting way off the subject here, but
well,
it's
this
all right
the
because.
way.
Now, suppose this is your basement here, and this is the street out here, and here's the curb, here's the gas main. Say it's under the pavement. Suppose you have a real nice lawn here, or perhaps
Yes.
a driveway here.
You get a black pencil, Bob?
Well, I have a blue one. You want?
They have a show up better, I think.
But your existing gas service
Nice
comes
car.
out from the house like this,
So,
comes out to the gas main. There's a fitting out here in the main, and then Irondequoit probably has a curb cock on it because of the higher pressures. Now, when this was laid, say this was an ordinary, say some subdivision street. Now, we laid this gas main here before the pavement was put in, therefore we didn't have to dig anything up. But now if we have to go back there and put a new steel service in there, we would have to dig up, we have to go onto the sidewalk, we might have to go onto the driveway, we might have to do a lot of things. But if we can take this steel gas service, and by putting a fitting in here at this end, and fitting down at this end to make sure that it's gas tight, we can put a piece of copper through here. And so we have to dig one little hole at the street to put the fitting on here between the copper and the steel. And again, in the basement, so we can run all the way from the street into the basement, unless we have to put a curb cock on it here, which is another little bit of a hole here. But by doing this, we cut, of course, it's less expensive for us to do it this way. But it also makes it unnecessary to dig up a lot of lawns and make great big pavement cuts.
Well, now they didn't do anything inside the house.
That's right, because they would merely, they disconnect the gas meter from the old service and they tie it back in again, right at the same point again.
Oh, I see.
So they wouldn't have, you wouldn't even notice a change, but there's a little fitting in there. And maybe if this is your basement wall here like this, well, actually, they may not even have bothered that, but they made very minor changes there. But what we do, to keep the cost of these down, you see now the reason we replace it is obviously because after, say, 40, 50 years, steel does tend to leak. And so when we get the first evidence that there's corrosion on that, we'll replace it with copper inside.
Well, did we have steel? Did we have steel? Ours was put in what? 1926.
Well, all the services are steel. All the gas services are steel. The main may be cast iron or steel, but the services are all steel. But this is one of the things, you see, in some cities, the customer in the past used to get just that amount of service free from the gas main up to the property line here. The curb cock is generally on the property line. They'd get that much free, and then they'd have to get a plumber to run this all the way in. I mean, different companies have different rules, but as long as we own this, we have to maintain it. We have to have it saved. That's one of our biggest expenses. It's say a $750,000 item a year for us just to replace these services because we can't take any chances.
I had to have my service renewed, but it was rather an unusual thing. I kept smelling gas in the basement, and I didn't know what it was, and I had my husband check it, and he couldn't find anything. I called the gas and electric, and they come down, and they couldn't find anything. Finally, my husband pretty near blew the place up because he took a candle, and right near where that comes into the house, you know, and then he called the gas electric, and they were down there in 15 minutes, and then, of course, they had to put in the new line.
Well, you see, it used to be that we'd have to wait until somebody smelled something. But of course, I mean, now this isn't bad. Remember, you can smell the gas when the concentration is about, well, let's say 5%, 2%, or 1% of a combustible mixture. That's not even an explosive mixture, just a combustible mixture. And so, if we have a suspected gas leak, what we used to have to do was to go out, and you may find them on streets where we've been. You go along there, and there'll be little holes like this. Little hole, maybe 2 inches diameter, with a plug in, or else maybe they're all filled up with dirt now. We used to have to drive a rod down, and then put a combustible gas indicator down near the gas main and see if we can get any kind of a combustible reading. See? Now what we can do is to drive over this thing with an infrared analyzer, and we can pick up this methane concentration in a matter of parts per million. And you can just drive right down the street. Now, if we have, say the truck is going down this way, and we have, say, a sewer catch basin over here, then he can go over here with a probe and just check that sewer catch basin as they walk along and go along. It's marked survey truck, and you'll find them all over the town. And we can survey the whole area that way, and we can find these leaks that are so very small that you'd never find them any other way. In fact, they record on a chart, for one thing, and also by the pitch. You can tell the closer you get, the lower the pitch. So they can pinpoint it, so they can call the crew and say, well, so many feet from this pole or from that house. And they can dig right there. It used to be that they'd have to dig several holes to find these leaks. So, there are other things you can use. You can use dogs, too. Dogs can smell gas, oddly enough, but you can't calibrate dogs. You don't know how bad the leak is, whether you can turn the dog off or not.
That was very interesting.
Yeah.
Part of these population figures that you gave us, do they take into account the change in population in the area?
That's what they do take into account.
In other words, this is a density count, really.
This-
You've reduced it to a uniform area.
They're all for the same area, the area of the town that now exists.
And that runs from 1840 on. This is it's not a monumental job, a very, very large job you've done.
I'd say a mighty good job.
I agree.
Any more questions?
To what extent is this general picture you've given us typical of the rest of the East, shall we say, or the area around Rochester? Is there anything unique, outstandingly unique about these figures as far as
Well, I think, of course, unique is a word that you can't have a superlative of.
Yeah,
Either things are
yeah,
unique
yeah.
or they aren't. But if you had to be redundant and say the thing that's most unique about the town is the fact that we've had good planning and zoning longer than most towns. In other words, we've kept out a lot of the things that have caused problems in other towns.
For example?
Well, small houses, trailer parks. You don't find any trailer parks in the town. There are a lot of things that have been kept out of this town because these fellows 40 years ago, or 30, 40 years ago, had an idea what they wanted, and they were strict about it. I mean, things that other towns are facing now, towns say like Gates are facing now, we faced 30 years ago. We're way ahead of it. We had such a backlog of information that we could help a lot of them. I think there are other things unique about the town, but that probably has done the town more good. The fact that there were strict rules then, and they were adhered to.
Well, what is the basic problem we now have before us that of population density? This discussion for apartment houses, if you take down 3 houses, 4 houses, or you take the land which is sufficient for 3 or 4 houses or 6 houses or whatever you have and put up 40 or 80 or 90 units depending on how high you go, isn't this the problem we have? We can get this density, but do we have the roads, do we have the schools, do we have the parks and whatnot to
This is what
support
the
it?
town board has to decide. The town board has to govern the future of the town and say, well, now, we need the taxes. If we're going to build an Indian Bluff apartment project, this is going to bring $3 million assessed valuation. Are we taking into account that we're going to have to widen the streets or go to it? Are we going to have to spend more to take care of that influx of population than it's going to bring to the town? And this is what the town board has to decide. But I know we often think on the board, wouldn't it be nice to go back 30 years and clean up Ridge Road East? I mean, but you can't do it. There's no turning things back. Now, it's not for anybody but the town board to decide whether apartments are in order or not. I mean, they can ask the planning board. I should point out the planning board and the zoning board of appeals are 2 different boards. We have the same people on them, but they're different boards. But the planning board would recommend to the town board that apartments either be allowed by rezoning or recommend that it should stay in its present state. But it's really up to the town board to decide the future of the town.
Well, legally this is true, but insofar as the individual citizen has a democratic right to consider the sort of a place he'd like to live in, isn't this basically the choice between all of us, that of population density? Whether we merely want to, don't you do that when you draw that line across there? And that one chart, don't you say that at about this density you think it's going to level off, or you prefer that it level
Continue
off?
our present policies.
Yeah.
But if we decide, well, let's tear down all the sea breeze, say north of, say Point Pleasant Road, and put in all apartments, say 15-story apartments, you could put a lot of people down there.
Provided you had cars that not only had automatic transmission, but had little gadgets up at the front right
we have
fender
to
that
think,
steered
I mean,
themselves for
do we
you.
need rapid transit? Do you need a rapid transit facility down there? All these things have to be taken into account.
But isn't this basically the thing I'm keeps forcing itself into my mind? We've lived in a nation which has considered itself as getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and isn't there a time when you have to consider whether you want to leave a little space to see the sky rather than put another 20 stories on top of the building?
I don't think that very many people in the town want to see it filled with apartments.
No.
I think most people would like to have it the way it was the day they moved into their house. Or
Oh, the day you kissed your first girl.
or at least the way it is now. I mean, you know, they hate the future for what it might bring. But I don't think that very many people want the town to get big just to get big.
Well, that was my question before.
Yeah.
It's, now, there's another question. Those lavender spots, are those along the river?
Yes.
Why aren't they good for
Well,
development or
steep,
something?
well, some of them are pretty steep slopes. You know, the railroad track runs along there, and some of those, actually, some of those little strips are in the city, if you want to be exact about it.
Yeah, right.
And you can't, I mean, they're almost vertical slopes down there. From, say, Rattlesnake Point and so forth, you just can't build on them.
Yeah, this
Well, they
purple area
tried.
on the bay here is a very large tract of land, but the part that they were taking for a park is only a very small part of that, isn't it?
Yeah, now remember, this is what the county says, and this isn't necessarily realistic. I mean, they're saying that large-scale suburban development can't be done on these. You can build individual homes, you can build apartments, but you can't lay out street after street of subdivision on these lands. That's about what they call residential
The
development.
park that they're gonna build here is just a little strip along in through here, isn't it?
Well, actually, they're talking about 107 acres, I think it is, which runs from runs from Bayview Road over here, and it's bounded, let's see, over here, actually right in here, I should say right in here. Yeah, this parcel right in here. There's about 101 or 106 acres, because I know we just had that case last week for a subdivision that comes right off here. Right off here, there's a proposed subdivision there. And this is one of the last parcels remaining. And the contest right now is for the town board to decide whether this should be rezoned to permit apartments there, or whether it should be left residential. Meanwhile, the county is trying to acquire this for the park. And so, and according to what the county has told us, that the federal government does not like parcels of less than 100 acres. So it's very critical. I think that there are just a hair over 100 acres there now.
Who does that belong to now?
John Wilson and one of the Brunsmas owns this one here now.
We got a walking encyclopedia with us tonight. You know everybody's phone number too, Bob?
No, but they know mine.
What are the brown parts in the purple?
That's just where, well, actually that means that that is actually developed in there. Even though it's unsuitable for development, it actually has been developed. People are living there, they shouldn't be living there. Well, you know, some of these places along the bay are not, along lakefront north here, are not really on developed land. They're just squatting sort of.
I'm so sorry that there are not more people here, because this is really very important.
I'm afraid there's gonna be a lot of people show up tomorrow night.
According to the bylaws, we've got to hold our election for next year. So we will proceed to do that. Now, Mr. Tyler isn't here on account of his aunt, Mrs. Hunt, is quite ill. Well, will you present the slate of the nomination by the committee for president?
The nominating committee reported in March on the slate, which was covered in the minutes for that meeting, and which is as follows: for president, Howard Tyler; for vice president, Mr. Morrison, Charles
Yeah.
Morrison; secretary, Mrs. George Kosich; and treasurer, Mr. Call. On behalf of the committee, I move the election of this slate.
Had we better do each office separately?
Move that you
Call for
cast a
nomination on the floor.
unanimous ballot.
Yeah.
I think we better have nominations from, any nominations from the floor?
It's a motion to cast a unanimous ballot.
Well, I withdraw the motion. It was badly out of order.
Well, now supposing, is there any other nominations for president besides Mr. Tyler?
Stick my neck
Oh, if so, I'll entertain a motion to cast one ballot for Mr. Tyler for
out.
president. The secretary,
I
do
moved
that.
that already. Somebody has to second it.
I second.
All in favor?
All right, now, Mr. Charles Morrison
No.
is nominated for vice president. Any other nominations?
It's finished.
Okay. Will somebody make a motion? You cast, I'll entertain a motion, same motion for Mr. Morrison.
So move you, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
And the secretary, Mrs. Kostic. Is there any other nominations? I hear none, so I'll entertain a motion for the secretary to cast a ballot for her.
So moved. Second?
Everyone
And
is ready to call.
Mr. Raymond Call for president. Is there any other nominations? Treasurer? Pardon me. I hear no other nominations. I'll entertain a motion for
Cast a unanimous ballot.
second.
You want to
Was
say
it
what?
second? Seconded.
That is it. Well, is there anything else wants to come before the meeting tonight? If not, the meeting is adjourned.
Very nice.
Oh, pardon me, I want to thank Mr. Gustafson for his excellent treatment of the growth of Irondequoit. I'm sorry that there wasn't a much larger crowd.
I think someone who's not an officer should also thank all the officers for a most successful year, Mr. President,
Well,
and other officers.
thank you, and we couldn't have had a successful year if it hadn't been for the cooperation of many of the members, for which I thank you very much.
Now I'm wondering whether we had a quorum.
Wait till I turn the tape recorder off. before-
Who can prove it?
Like,